is tingling.
What does the Catholic Church say about capitalism and the role of the government in helping the poor? And how does this oppose what Republicans have to say about this issue?
These are excellent questions and also very valid concerns. Hello everyone, I'm Captain Catholic, and I hope I'm able to address these important questions of yours. This video is actually part of a larger series discussing various political issues. Often, people will ask the question, should Catholics be Republicans or Democrats? Obviously, the answer to that question is that Catholics shouldn't be either Democrats or Republicans. This is because the Catholic Church has many strong viewpoints that oppose the views of both Democrats and Republicans, depending on the issue. So throughout this series, we'll be taking a look at how the views of the Catholic Church oppose each political party on selected issues. Specifically, throughout this series, we'll look at how the Catholic Church opposes the Republican Party on the issues of war and military spending, gun control, capitalism and the role of the government in helping the poor, immigration, and climate change. We'll also be taking a look at how the views of the Catholic Church oppose the Democratic Party on the issues of abortion, stem cell research, euthanasia, and religious freedom. This particular video will focus on the topic of capitalism and the role of the government in helping the poor. So, let's begin. To put it briefly, the Republican Party and the Catholic Church have a very different view on free market capitalism and also on the role of the government in helping the poor. In regards to the Republican Party, Republicans tend to view free market capitalism as the answer to all problems. Republicans tend to resist government regulation of the marketplace, and they tend to believe in lower taxes for the wealthiest people in society. Most Republicans do not believe that the government should be involved in helping the poor, and they will often praise cuts to anti-poverty government programs. Furthermore, Republicans tend to look to the theory of trickle-down economics to help the poor. All of these attitudes strongly contradict what the Catholic Church has to say about capitalism and the role of the government in helping the poor. To understand the Church's views on these issues, let's first take a look at what the Catholic Church teaches about capitalism and free market economics. The Catechism of the Catholic Church states, "The Catholic Church has refused to accept, in the practice of capitalism, individualism and the absolute primacy of the law of the marketplace over human labor." Pope Benedict XVI has stated, "It is alarming to see hotbeds of tension and conflict caused by growing instances of inequality between rich and poor, by the prevalence of a selfish and individualistic mindset, which also finds expression in an unregulated financial capitalism." St. Pope John Paul II has stated, "The position of rigid capitalism continues to remain unacceptable, namely, the position that defends the exclusive right to private ownership of the means of production as an untouchable dogma of economic life." So as you can see, the Catholic Church strongly disapproves of unregulated free market capitalism. From the Catholic Church's point of view, unregulated capitalism creates a self-centered and individualistic mindset which favors the rich and harms the poor. In unregulated capitalist economies, the rich get richer and the poor remain poor without anyone to ensure that their basic needs are met. Because of this, the Catholic Church teaches that government intervention is necessary to help the poor. Let's take a look now at a few quotes highlighting the Catholic Church's desire for governments to be involved in helping the poor. Pope Leo XIII has stated, "When there is question of defending the rights of individuals, the defenseless and the poor have a claim to special consideration. The richer class has many ways of shielding itself and stands less in need of help from the state, whereas the mass of the poor have no resources of their own to fall back on and must chiefly depend on the assistance of the state." St. Pope John Paul II has stated, "It is the task of the state to provide for the defense and preservation of common goods, which cannot be safeguarded simply by market forces." Pope Francis has stated, "While the income of a minority is increasing exponentially, that of the majority is crumbling." This imbalance results from ideologies which uphold the absolute autonomy of markets and financial speculation, and thus deny the right of control to states, which are themselves charged with providing for the common good. The Compendium of the Social Doctrine of the Catholic Church states, "There exist certain sectors in which the market, making use of the mechanisms at its disposal, is not able to guarantee an equitable distribution of the goods and services that are essential for the human growth of citizens. In such cases, the complementarities of state and market are needed more than ever. So as you can see, the Catholic Church teaches that government intervention is needed to make sure that the poor have their needs met. An unregulated free market economy alone will never meet the needs of the poor.
But how should governments help the poor?
Well, the Catholic Church teaches that governments have the duty to redistribute wealth to an extent by taxing the rich to create programs that help the poor. Let's take a look now at a few quotes from the Catholic Church on the role of governments in taxing the wealthy to help the poor. The United States Conference of Catholic Bishops has stated the tax system should be continually evaluated in terms of its impact on the poor. This evaluation should be guided by three principles. First, the tax system should raise adequate revenues to pay for the public needs of society, especially to meet the basic needs of the poor. Secondly, the tax system should be structured according to the principle of progressivity, so that those with relatively greater financial resources pay a higher rate of taxation. The inclusion of such a principle in tax policies is an important means of reducing the severe inequalities of income and wealth in the nation. Pope Paul VI has stated, "It is not just a question of eliminating hunger and reducing poverty on the part of the rich man. It calls for great generosity, willing sacrifice, and diligent effort. Each man must examine his conscience, which sounds a new call in our present times. Is he prepared to support, at his own expense, projects and undertakings designed to help the needy? Is he prepared to pay higher taxes so that public authorities may expand their efforts in the work of development?" The Compendium of the Social Doctrine of the Catholic Church states, "Looking after the common good means making use of the new opportunities for the redistribution of wealth among the different areas of the planet to the benefit of the underprivileged that until now have been excluded or cast to the sidelines of social and economic progress." So basically, the Catholic Church teaches that the government is obligated to tax wealthier citizens in order to redistribute wealth and to fund programs that help the poor.
But how is that fair? My money is my money. I should have the right to do whatever I want with my own money. Yeah.
While it's certainly true that we need the right to private property, the Catholic Church teaches that the right to private property is not the first and foremost right in society. Instead, the Catholic Church teaches that the most basic principle in our world is the universal destination of goods.
The universal destination of goods. What is that?
The Catholic Church's principle of the universal destination of goods means that God created our world with more than enough food, water, and all things necessary in order for everyone to have their basic needs met. So, if there are impoverished people in society who do not have their basic needs met, then somebody needs to step in and make sure that such people get their basic needs met. This is especially true when there are people in society, such as the wealthy, who are living in excess. Therefore, the Catholic Church teaches that it is necessary for the government to step in to tax the wealthy, who are living in excess, in order to help the poor, who need to have their basic needs met, as God intended. Let's take a look now at some quotes from the Catholic Church that further examine this concept of the universal destination of goods. The Compendium of the Social Doctrine of the Catholic Church states, "God gave the earth to the whole human race for the sustenance of all its members, without excluding or favoring anyone. The right to the common use of goods is the first principle of the whole ethical and social order, and the characteristic principle of Christian social doctrine." Pope Paul VI has stated, "The right to private property is not absolute and unconditional. No one may appropriate surplus goods solely for his own private use when others lack the bare necessities of life." St. Pope John Paul II has stated, "The goods of this world are originally meant for all. Private property, in fact, is under a social mortgage, which means that it has an intrinsically social function, based upon and justified precisely by the principle of the universal destination of goods." St. Pope John Paul II has further stated, one of the greatest injustices in the contemporary world consists precisely in this, that the ones who possess much are relatively few, and those who possess almost nothing are many. It is the injustice of the poor distribution of the goods and services originally intended for all.
I don't get it though. Why does the government have to be involved in helping the poor? Can't we just give money to the poor on our own?
While giving to private charities is certainly a wonderful thing to do, the Catholic Church teaches that this is not enough. Corrupt economic structures that harm the poor, such as free market capitalism, need to be changed in order to really solve the problem. Let's take a look at another quote from St. Pope John Paul II on this matter, who stated, "Constant dedication to the poor and disadvantaged emerges in the Church's social teaching. It is a question not only of alleviating the most serious and urgent needs through individual actions here and there, but of uncovering the roots of evil and proposing initiatives to make social, political, and economic structures more just and fraternal."
Yeah, well, but again, I don't know if taxing the wealthy is necessary to help the poor. In fact, can't we do the opposite? What about trickle-down economics? If we give tax breaks to the rich, won't that money trickle down to the poor eventually?
Well, no. The Catholic Church actually has a very negative view of trickle-down economics. Pope Francis has stated, "Some people continue to defend trickle-down theories which assume that economic growth, encouraged by a free market, will inevitably succeed in bringing about greater justice and inclusiveness in the world. This opinion, which has never been confirmed by the facts, expresses a crude and naive trust in the goodness of those wielding economic power and in the sacralized workings of the prevailing economic system. Meanwhile, the excluded are still waiting." Pope Francis continues, mentioning how trickle-down theories make a false promise. He states, "Trickle-down theories assume that economic growth, encouraged by a free market, will inevitably succeed in bringing about greater justice and social inclusiveness in the world. The promise was that when the glass was full, it would overflow, benefiting the poor. But what happens instead is that when the glass is full, it magically gets bigger. Nothing ever comes out for the poor." Essentially, Pope Francis is saying that trickle-down economics force the poor to depend on the rich. This is a major problem because there's no guarantee that the wealthy will actually do anything to help the poor. So what happens is that the poor end up being completely forgotten. But instead, when the government taxes the wealthy for anti-poverty programs, it is guaranteed that the needs of the poor will be met. So because of this, the Catholic Church teaches that the first step we should make in evaluating any economic or political action is to first evaluate how that action will affect the poor. The Catholic Church refers to this concept as the preferential option for the poor. In reference to this concept, Pope Benedict XVI has stated, "The preferential option for the poor flows from our understanding of Jesus himself, who became poor himself so that we might be rich in him." The United States Conference of Catholic Bishops has stated, "As individuals and as a nation, therefore, we are called to make a fundamental option for the poor, the obligation to evaluate social and economic activity from the viewpoint of the poor and the powerless arises from the radical command to love one's neighbor as oneself." St. Pope John Paul II has stated, "Love of preference for the poor and the decisions which it inspires in us cannot but embrace the immense multitudes of the hungry, the needy, the homeless, those without medical care, and, above all, those without hope of a better future. It is impossible not to take account of the existence of these realities. To ignore them would mean becoming like the rich man who pretended not to know the beggar Lazarus lying at his gate." So as you can see, the Catholic Church gives preference to the poor when evaluating every economic decision. On the other hand, the theory of trickle-down economics begins with thinking about the rich. Instead, we must begin with thinking about the poor, and then we can work our way up from there.
This is getting really long. You know, I don't even feel the need to help the poor anyway. Aren't they just a bunch of lazy leeches?
No. In fact, the Catholic Church is very opposed to viewing poor people as just a bunch of lazy people looking to leech off of others. Instead, the Catholic Church views the poor as victims of unjust economic structures, among other factors which are unjust. Let's take a look at a few more quotes to examine this further. St. Pope John Paul II has stated, "The poor are becoming ever more numerous, victims of specific policies and structures which are often unjust." St. Pope John Paul II has also stated, "It will be necessary, above all, to abandon a mentality in which the poor, as individuals and as peoples, are considered a burden, as irksome intruders trying to consume what others have produced." So in the end, you can easily see how the Catholic Church's negative views of unregulated capitalism directly clash with the Republican Party's positive views of capitalism. You can also see how the Catholic Church and the Republican Party have very different views on the role of the government in helping the poor. Let's take a look now at a concrete example that illustrates these differences. In March of 2012, Republican Representative Paul Ryan introduced a new budget proposal for the federal government called the Path to Prosperity. The Republican budget proposal called for a $200 billion increase in military spending, and at the same time, it proposed to cut multiple government anti-poverty programs by hundreds of billions of dollars. Namely, the Republicans proposed to make a $134 billion cut to SNAP, which stands for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, formerly known as food stamps. They also wanted to make substantial cuts to other anti-poverty programs which helped children of immigrants, the homeless, the elderly, and the disabled, among other populations. Naturally, the Catholic bishops of the United States opposed these cuts, and they wrote to Congress to encourage them to continue to fund government anti-poverty programs such as food stamps and the Child Tax Credit Program. Let's take a look at their letter. All right, so we're looking here at the U.S. Catholic bishops' actual letter to Congress. Here's what they have to write. A just framework for future budgets cannot rely on disproportionate cuts in essential services to poor persons. It requires shared sacrifice by all, including raising adequate revenues, eliminating unnecessary military and other spending, and addressing the long-term costs of health insurance and retirement programs fairly. I reiterate our strong opposition to an unfair proposal that would alter the child tax credit to exclude children of hard-working immigrant families. The Bishops' Conference has long supported the child tax credit because it is pro-work, pro-family, and one of the most effective anti-poverty programs in our nation. The bishops continue, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, formerly known as food stamps, provides vital food security to families during tough economic times. It is estimated that cuts proposed in this bill would deny assistance to 2 million families and cut the benefit for everyone else. No poor family that receives food assistance would be unaffected, constituting a direct threat to their human dignity. The bishops continue, the Social Services Block Grant is an important source of funding for programs throughout the country that serve vulnerable members of our communities, the homeless, the elderly, people with disabilities, children living in poverty, and abuse victims. We should prioritize programs that serve the least of these, not eliminate them. The Catholic bishops of the United States recognize the serious deficits our country faces, and we acknowledge that Congress must make difficult decisions about how to allocate burdens and sacrifices and balance resources and needs. However, deficit reduction and fiscal responsibility efforts must protect and not undermine the needs of poor and vulnerable people. The proposed cuts to programs in the budget reconciliation fail this basic moral test. So as you can see, this is a perfect example of Republicans looking to get rid of government assistance for the poor and of the Catholic Church trying to maintain government assistance for the poor. Alright, so that just about ends our coverage on how the Catholic Church's views on capitalism and the role of the government in helping the poor oppose the views of Republicans on this issue. Be sure to check out any of the other videos in this series to see how the Catholic Church opposes each political party's views on other selected issues. So, what were your thoughts on the issues presented in this video? Please feel free to discuss your thoughts on these issues in the official Captain Catholic Facebook group, Captain Catholic Wants You. All people of goodwill are welcomed and encouraged to join the discussion, regardless of your religious or political views. Please just remember to be respectful and kind to all people in the group, regardless of whether or not they agree with your views. Also, feel free to check out the official Captain Catholic website, captaincatholic.com, for more videos. And before we go, just one final thought on this video. Please be aware that in this video, I was not attempting to give you a comprehensive summary of the Catholic Church's teachings on these issues. That would take hours, even more time than I wasted of yours already. So for time's sake, I tried to simply give you a few brief quotes that effectively highlighted some of the Catholic Church's teachings on these issues. Nevertheless, despite being brief, I'm sure these quotes show you how the Catholic Church directly and clearly opposes views held by both the Republican and Democratic parties. So hopefully you can use this video as a starting point to learn more about the Catholic Church's teachings on these issues in depth. Thank you so much for watching. And regardless of whatever your personal views may be, I will be sure to keep you in my prayers, and I wish you a fantastic day. Peace be with you.